Spent months trying to figure out the perfect entry point for modern day gaming for a PC, and I think I've nailed it. The objectives were it had to be upgrade friendly, have some style, and most importantly, had to come under £500. Let's check it out. This is Destello tech. Destello. And meet Luz. This is a £429 PC if you wanted to build it yourself, or a £499 PC if you want it built and delivered to your door in the UK. Let's run through what makes Luz tick. CPU I went with was the Ryzen 5 5500. 6 cores, 12 threads, perfect for 1080p gaming, streaming a bit, browsing and everyday use. It's cool and it doesn't choke the GPU that I paired it with, and it runs efficient. I nearly went with Ryzen 5 3600, but it performs basically the same at a really similar cost, and the 5500 is much more efficient and easier to find brand new for around £65, and also includes the stock cooler. Speaking of which, the cooler I decided to go for in this build was the stock cooler. It's fine for the Ryzen 5 5500, temperatures stay pretty reasonable. It keeps the cost down. If you wanted quieter fans and maybe better temperatures, you can always opt to go for a tower cooler instead. The motherboard I went with was the AM4 B450M. This specific motherboard was the Maxon B450 Challenger. It's a solid little board that does everything that you need here. And yeah, I'm the official selling partner for Maxon in the UK, so you'll see a lot more products from them being used on this channel. That being said, you don't necessarily need to get this B450. Most B450 boards will do the job, and they usually come in at around £60 as well. For the RAM, I decided to go with 32GB at 3200 MHz. This one is a Lexor Thor kit, and honestly I just feel that 16GB probably just isn't enough nowadays, especially with how bloated Windows has become. You really start to feel it with a few mods and heavy gaming, so 32GB makes it feel like there's not as much of a bottleneck. One thing to note is DDR4 prices have become a bit crazy right now. I would definitely recommend to grab one from the used or refurbished market instead of buying brand new. This kit cost me about £50, and this has been fully tested before going in. The graphics card I went with is a slightly older GPU, but still very capable at 1080p for esports titles. I went with the Nvidia's GTX 1660 Super, and even though it's 6 years old, it's still reliable, efficient, and I feel the perfect entry point for this type of PC. You can usually find them for around £80 to £90 on the used market, and like every part that goes into my build, I fully test them and repaste them so they're ready and running as good as new. Storage I went with was the Kingston NV3 1TB NVMe. It's technically a Gen 4 drive, so with the B450 motherboard you won't get the full speeds, but realistically you're not going to notice from day-to-day use. And 1TB feels like the real minimum that you can have in a PC nowadays, with games like Call of Duty Warzone really eating into the storage at 100 plus gigabytes every time. This drive costs around £60. The case I went with is a CIT Celsius RGB case. This comes in white and black. It's a fish tank look PC case with 3 RGB fans included that change colours. Airflow is decent, of course not amazing, but for £45 you can't really complain. Cable management takes a bit of patience, and it's not the most perfect setup, but as long as you're careful and you take your time, you can manage it absolutely fine like I did. As I said, for £45 it's really hard to beat. The power supply I went with was the CIT 500 watt bronze. Now with power supplies, people love to obsess over tier lists and certifications. But here's the reality. For a build like this, 500 watts, bronze rated, and paired with an efficient CPU and GPU, this is going to be more than enough. Safe, stable, and keeps the build affordable. This one come in at about £35. By the way, this whole build was streamed live on my YouTube and my Twitch channels. I stream for most Thursdays at 7 PM GMT, or BST. So if you want to see these PCs built in real time, come hang out and we can chat and we can have discussions about PC related content, etc. So how well does Luz actually perform in games? Let's take a look at the benchmarks. Here in Halo Infinite, a not so popular title nowadays, but a good test of the CPU and GPU, we were getting an average of 103 FPS with 79% FPS, 1% lows. Frame time sticking around the 8 to 10 milliseconds, so pretty responsive. Game looks pretty good on low and medium settings, this is. Still very a popular esports title in 2025, Apex Legends, running at 1080p on competitive settings, getting an average FPS of 183 with 1% lows at 140 FPS average. Frame times looking really nice, so very competitive style of play. Even I was able to rattle off a few kills, which is very unusual for me in any competitive title. In Call of Duty Warzone with competitive settings at 1080p, FSR3 was enabled with frame generation on this scenario, getting an average of FPS of about 155, 1% lows at 90 FPS, and the frame time sticking around that 7 millisecond mark. Very competitive experience and very fluid, I felt. Sometimes with FSR you don't really want to use it because it reduces image quality, but I think it was fine here. On CS2, on competitive settings or the recommended settings at 1080p, I was getting an average of 180 FPS with a frame time of just under 6 milliseconds usually. Very competitive experience if you're any good at the game, unlike me. Yeah, very nice to play. No real bottlenecks with either the CPU or the GPU here. On GTA 5, using the very popular 5M mod, which allows role playing in GTA, I was getting an average of 129 FPS with the mostly high settings enabled at 1080p. This isn't really a competitive title, so the FPS isn't really something to consider that much, but it's definitely a very smooth and very playable experience. Graphically looking pretty good, even though the game is getting old in its age. Now on to another very popular esports title, playing Valorant. I mean, this game can run on a block of cheese or a potato. I don't know why I said a block of cheese. Comfortably getting 255 FPS average. The average counter isn't updating properly here for some reason, but you're going to get well over 300 FPS on average. Frame time is going to be excellent as well. You're getting well under 4 milliseconds. If you're any good at the game, you're going to have a more than nice competitive experience. You should be able to get kills, unlike me. Another very popular but very easy to run esports title was Rocket League. It was getting an average of 220 FPS with 101 FPS, 1% lows. Frame time was nice and low. If you're competitive and good at the game, you're going to have a really nice experience with this PC. Of course, if you say esports, you're going to have to put Fortnite in here. And I was getting an average of around 217 FPS on 1080p competitive stroke pro settings. This is a really good experience especially for starting out on Fortnite. As you can see, I actually got a victory royale, which is unusual to say the least. On Cinebench, the PC scored a multi-score of 9,313 points. Pretty typical for a PC of this spec. With 3D Mark Time Spy, we achieved a score of 6,179, so pretty good score. And again, probably what you would expect to see from this kind of build. So this is Luz. Upgrade friendly, sharp, and under £500. If you want to build it yourself, the full kit is in the link down below. But you can also buy this complete, ready to go for £499. So that was Luz. And this is Destello tech. Remember,